Hi, everyone. Welcome to this webinar on understanding your corporate data with COVID-19 data statistics. It's, I think, an unusual subject. I haven't seen anyone else trying to do this yet. I'm sure that a lot of people are trying to do it on their own. So I hope that maybe today what we do can be useful to you. This is a bit of an advanced subject, but if you are a beginner in Power BI, I wouldn't worry. We're going to provide you with all the files. If you have any extra questions after the webinar, I want you to feel free to email me and ask them. And you can do a lot of copy pasting until you understand what exactly it is you're doing. So with that said, let's get started. My name is Robin Abramson. I'm a senior consultant with now 3 Cloud Solutions, formerly with Pragmatic Works. I'm a former past board member. I've been working with data actually for 20 years now. Oh, I reused the slide. I have to fix that. I love Power BI. It's literally my favorite thing to do, even when I'm not working. I live in the Pacific Northwest near Portland, Oregon, and I provided you with some links here to different ways to reach me. This entire presentation is also going to be made available to you so that you can download it and look at how we went through everything when it's done. And if you see a link here, this is to Dropbox. Unfortunately, from changing to 3 Cloud, I just discovered last night that I was not able to share it via our own SharePoint. So right now it's in Dropbox. I also have a Google link to Google Drive if this doesn't work for anyone, and I'll get to that at the end if that's still something that you guys need. But you should be able to download from Dropbox for free just by clicking here. So basically what we're going to have to do today is take 2 disparate sets of data, one that's coming from Johns Hopkins, which is the COVID-19 data that you see on their dashboard that you've probably seen on TV a million times. They actually make that available to you via GitHub, and it's free for anyone who wants to get to it. The tricky part was finding it in the beginning. I think it's a little easier now. When Paul and I first started to look for it, it was quite an adventure just finding where the data was and figuring out how to download it. So the first thing you're going to be able to do is download the updates every day from Johns Hopkins. You'll do that just like refreshing from any database or any other web pages that you might be scraping from Power BI. Then you're going to also have to refresh your corporate data. Some of you might do that every day. In the case where you're just looking at the broad statistics, you might be just doing that once a month. Depends on what you're trying to figure out. And then, of course, you'll be working with the combined data set to better understand your challenges. A lot of people are having issues with supply chain, backing things up if they're doing manufacturing or if they're trying to be a reseller. In this particular data set that we're going to be working with, we are a fake food supplier. That's the only way I could think of to say it. We're basically selling items which don't really have a name. They're just items and they fall into different categories, and they're going to food suppliers around the world. So how did this happen? Earlier this year, Paul Turley and I were working really long hours for a client we had on the East Coast. We both live on the West Coast. And they were starting to see a lot of supply chain disruptions due to COVID-19. So they asked us to create a series of reports, and it really helped them to understand the impact that the supply chain disruptions were having on their business, because not only were they finding that they were losing sales because people couldn't accept goods, they were also having trouble getting items in, and because of that, orders were going out late, and because they were going out late, logistics issues were happening. And because logistics issues were happening, customers were unable to sell the goods. And then you had customers that were literally becoming cash strapped or credit strapped and even going out of business. And it was all cascading to affect this particular client. Now they're still coming out of it very strongly. So I think they're going to be okay, but it's something that every single business in the world right now has to deal with. So hopefully you can use this to start the process of discovering what your issues are and how to somewhat predict them based on how badly things are going or how well things are going. So one day we were finishing up and I just, off the top of my head, said someone should make a COVID template so we can make their own dashboards. And so then I logged off thinking we were done. Paul didn't. The next day he'd already started this project. And we worked on it together for a while. I was super busy at that time working, 14, 15 hours days for this client who was very eager to get this under control. And he got a lot done. My help at that point was mainly watching him code and saying, oh, hey, you missed this there, that there. I don't know about if any of you ever tried it, but we find that working in teams is sometimes super helpful when it comes to writing a lot of Dax super fast. Also Power Query, there's a lot of Power Query in this report. So I like to say that my biggest contribution to this entire report that he wrote that ended up being available to you as a template on the Microsoft website is that I convinced him to make it not dark blue. And anyone who's worked with the dark blue report knows what I'm talking about. So we also had some help from some other pragmatic works. Now, one of them is now a 3Cloud consultant, and we got it done. So the COVID data lives on GitHub. It has to be downloaded in 2 parts, however, and we found this out the hard way. On 3/21, they changed the format of the flat file that contains all the data. It's much better now, but in order to get all the data now, you have to pull it down in 2 different files. We use parameters whenever we can so that you can just change them if needed. That's another thing that's a lesson learned from 3/21. We use functions that are called by the queries to grab the files, and they basically iterate through, and I'll be showing you how we do that. Does it sound complicated? Yes, it does. Is it complicated? Yeah, kind of. But we do provide you with the code, and you can reuse this code to do all sorts of things anytime you want to scrape through a GitHub repository later. This is advanced Power BI, but beginners can still learn from this, and you can benefit from it. You can use the file as is and just figure out how to plug your own SQL Server or Excel files or whatever it is you have available into it. There's another link here where you can actually download the files from. I'll let this sit for just a second in case anyone wants to click there. Again, my apologies for GitHub. For Dropbox. It was a last minute thing, but I also just before this meeting started put up another file on Google Drive, which I will get you the link for if you need it. Security. If you're using row level security, you can still use it this way. It's the same as any other file. You're just basically combining 2 files. You have to, you'll get a privacy warning, which you have to accept, but you can still keep your security, your row level security on your fact table. So that shouldn't be any issue. This is a lot of data, even in this fake report that I made. There's over 700,000 rows in it, but you're going to find that it's extremely fast because what I used was a very narrow fact table. And it's, I think, a good example of how it can be very fast to use narrow files. Okay, if you're new to Power BI, don't worry. This is all written for you. You don't have to do this, but I just want to go through it very quickly. This is how we get the list of the COVID files. It's a function that gets called inside Power BI. I'm not going to go through every line. Basically, what's interesting about it is that it gets called and then another function gets called from it, from the same query that uses this function afterwards. This is the pre-321 query. And as you can see, it's using a, it's using a parameter called base URL, a parameter called URL path, and a parameter called file name. These can all be easily changed if anything changes again in the files. And then we get to the actual report. It's got real COVID data downloaded from Hopkins. It's got a bunch of fake corporate data. Everything from the customer names to the quantities ordered is fake. The customers were put in by hand, and I say please forgive the high percentage of silly names, because after coming up with about 100 names, I started using anything I could think of. The numbers in the fact table were randomly generated using the RAND function in SQL Server. They probably aren't going to correlate to the COVID numbers as well as any real corporate data will. They certainly don't correlate as well as the COVID data that I saw at that particular client I was at when this was all happening. The data structures and elements are for suggestion only. As long as you're able to join the two data sets, you need to be able to join them on date, and you need to be able to join them on location. As long as you can do those two things, and I provided you with the things that you need to do to be able to do that, then you'll be able to use any data that you want. You can put your forecasts in there and combine and check them according to what you're actually seeing happening. You can pull in more specific item-related data. You can pull in plant data, whatever you have that you need to check. Few notes. This is only one way to do this. There are dozens of APIs, websites, and other sources that you can use to get COVID data. In my experience, this one was the easiest for me, but that's also because this is how we started. I might think an API was easier if I was starting fresh. If you've attended my other webinars in the past, I usually do my Power BI trickery, which involves a lot of things like dynamic columns and things like that. I'm not doing that here. I am doing one small bit of trickery, which is just using switch in a kind of creative way. I'll show you that. This COVID data is up until yesterday. And as I said before, the corporate data is a lie, but it does continue through, I think, a couple days ago. The product groups are, again, a fictitious set of data. And so if they seem a little bit odd, they were also being made up on the fly. But they do allow you to do grouping and slicing as you want. The forecasts that you'll see on some of the line charts are just forecasts from the Power BI Analytics pane. It's very easy to use, but they're not the best forecasts. I mean, they're not going to be the same thing you're going to get from your data scientists if you do have data scientists. So what you can do is use these until you have accumulated enough data that your data scientists feel comfortable creating models from them. So what now? We're going to use the provided files as a starting point. Then you're going to need to find out exactly what data your company needs. You are probably not going to need the same things that I'm showing today. You're going to want to consider other options that you might want to display. I've only provided a small set of measures to show how this can be done. There's a lot of other things you would want to look at. You might want to look at, okay, there was an increase in COVID cases of 6% this month, and I had an increase in cancellations of 3%. Does that correlate to what I'm going to see next month or what I saw the month before? These are things you'll probably want to be looking at. I didn't get that deep into it. And again, here's how to contact me and where the webinar source files are. I'm just going to go right now to the actual, oops, there's me. You don't need to see me. Okay, this is the actual file on our 3Cloud web service. This is how it looks. I just wanted to show you, this is the introduction page. Again, this is the credits. I want to give Paul Turley the credit he deserves because he did all the hard work while I just sat there and said, change that, change this. Here is the where we get the data from, where the Johns Hopkins data comes from is right here. This is the GitHub that we use to pull the data from. And we had the extra help from Pete and Carol. And then we actually got some Power Query support from a couple of my heroes there. And that was really kind of fun for me to be on an email list with them, although Paul does that all the time. So this is the first page that actually corresponds to what just the COVID report. I just wanted to show you, this is some of the data that you can get from it. You can see the confirmed cases, non-recovered, confirmed per million, number of deaths. Now this is the worldwide report we're looking at right here. You can also, because it's Power BI, you can click on a country and bring it down to just that country. Pull it back out again. We have a list here of all the countries. Tried to make this very clean and easy for you to read. Not a lot that's very specific to it. And then the next page is where it starts to get interesting. On this page, I have the COVID metrics combined with your corporate metrics. And what I've done here is I've created two little slicer menus. So you can change from looking at confirmed cases to looking at COVID deaths. At the same time, I'm looking at a few different corporate metrics here. You can change this to be any metrics you want. This is just what I used. It's basically what we used at the original reports that I made for this company that we were working at. Basically, inflow means that it's orders that were brought in from previous months because they were delayed during those previous months due to COVID-related issues. Then we have outflow to future months. These are orders that are delayed to a future time because either we don't have the parts or the customer can't accept them or whatever that would be that would cause the orders to move to a different month, which is, I mean, all this is going to drastically affect your bottom line. You're going to need to know, where's the stuff going to be stored? Do I have it? Do I have logistics to get it? Do I have a warehouse? Do I have, if you're a manufacturer, you're going to want to know if you have time on the, in the manufacturing plant to actually do it. Then we also have canceled orders. These obviously are going to affect the bottom line. And then we are just also showing on this page orders that just don't have any change at all. But as you can see, we have all the different countries and states listed here right now. I haven't narrowed it down at this point. I can change the dates that I'm looking at, go back in time a little. I can narrow it down to one specific country, or I can look at a state. They are both in here at this point, but if I wanted to say, just show me United States. I can do that. Now I can go state by state and say what's happening in Pennsylvania. I have some of my best clients there. Or I can go to the customers, choose a customer like Awesome Shoes Limited. And these are the places that have records for Awesome Shoes Limited. Apparently they're located in Alabama. I can filter this down to just show Awesome Shoes Limited in Alabama. Or I can leave this back up, but as you see, the corporate metrics are now filtered to just that client. I also have non-recovered cases, which is pretty much all the US cases because most US states aren't recovering that, aren't reporting recovered cases. So you'll see a lot of zeros for recovered cases. A lot of places just don't report that. But I've included it in case there's a particular area that you want to look at that does use the recovered cases. I can clear that. On this page, I went a little more deeply into some of the different things that you might want to look at. We still have the same little mini menu here. And this is where I've done a little bit of the Power BI trickery I mentioned. as you can see here, we have this bar chart, or I'm sorry, this line chart that has lines for everything that's listed here. We have inflow, outflow, canceled, no change, and confirmed cases. But when I click one of these menu items, it switches down to just that menu item and the confirmed cases, which is what we're comparing it against. So each one of these, we're comparing it against confirmed cases for that month. As you can see how, or not necessarily a month. Right now it's looking at all. Let's choose a month. Here we go. Now we're looking at the month of June. As you can see, that's reflected in the title of this visualization. And we can see that in this particular data set, inflow actually followed pretty closely to the confirmed cases for that month. These are outflow to future months, and here's a case where the data just didn't match. And you can see that the confirmed cases continues to go up, but this stayed pretty steady for that month. Cancel cases, this stayed very close to what actually happened with the COVID. And again, this is very useful. If you see this kind of line crossing over the solid line that's just the confirmed cases, then you know that you're following those trends and you can prepare for what happens if you hear reports that, you know, they're expecting cases to go up or down. Also on this page, I've included these 3-month forecasts. That's basic what they are, and I'll show you how to do this inside the file in a second. This is the data we're getting from June. And then based on the way that was going, Power BI is now forecasted out that it's probably going to go this way. It's also giving you an upper bound and a lower bound based on probabilities. On this particular page, instead of giving you slicers, I've given you actually tables where you can just click and slice by the table. Each one of the countries listed here has been filtered down to only show countries that actually have data here. That's just to keep you from going crazy because there's so many. And it tells you what customers are in that country. You can further take it down. And then it takes this down to just that. And of course, you know, and if that customer has no data during these months, that's what you're going to see. So again, I will show you this inside the report. Also, something that I found was very, very important to all the business people that I spoke to was, why is this happening? This is a made-up list of reasons, some of which I got because I saw customers asking about them. And basically, it's just, okay, let me filter out how many of our customers went out of business during this time, and that's the reason. Oh, okay, there's no inflow for that, no outflow for that. Oops, we had canceled ones because the customer went out of business. That actually makes sense. So that's there. And then on the last page, I just give you instructions on how to go about refreshing the files. This page is all Paul Turley. All I did was copy paste his work. So I just want to take that second to give him credit for what he did. So the first thing I'm going to show you is this is the back end of the Power BI report itself. And it might be a little small, but you can see we have the 3 functions that we looked at inside the file. We also, I'm going to try and finish this up quickly enough that we can get a good amount of questions in. So I'm going to try and speed up a little bit. These are the actual Hopkins files. And if we look at the advanced editor, you'll see those queries that we were talking about where they're using the get file before 321 and after 321 based on what they were doing. In here, I also have parameters for a CSV folder because I have exported out all the data into CSV, so you can import it or you can change it and you can look at the data structure and put whatever you want. There's a few disconnected tables. I actually didn't use this but in my report, but it's a really good one, so I left it. And the selected measure table here, which is just confirmed cases, deaths, recovered, that's what we were just looking at. And then, of course, the front end. And what I wanted to show you here specifically was, oops, wrong page, was how we're getting the single line here by changing this, because it's a little bit tricky. And basically what it's doing is, in here we're using some dynamic, what I call dynamic measures, but they're not really dynamic. It's just a simple switch statement. And each one of the measures has a sum of, and then it has a cumulative sum measure. But all this does is it says, get me the selected value from this slicer, and then switch. If it says, this is the canceled one, so if the line says canceled, then return it. If it says all metrics, then return it. But if this says something else, then just return a blank. So these lines are all in here for each one of these, for everything you click. It's just that they're showing blank whenever it's not what's selected in this slicer, which is something I only thought of doing recently. Other people might have been doing it a long time, but I just thought about doing that as one way to get a kind of dynamic line chart, which seems pretty fun. And with that, I think we have about a half hour left, I hope, because this is going to be where most of it comes in. I want to open it up for questions now. Crystal?
Yes, I'm here. Let me see if you have any questions in here. There's a question that says viewers cannot click on the links over video. It says, will this be available for download?
Yes. Okay. Let me post the. I can do that for you right now. Let's see.
Someone also asks, Miriam, you asked, will a recording of the session be available and shared? Yes, a recording will be available. You should receive the recording tomorrow in your email box. And if you do not receive it, all of our recordings are now on to our new YouTube platform, which is 3 Cloud Solutions. So if you just go to 3 Cloud Solutions on YouTube, you will find our presentations. But you guys will receive this recording in your email box tomorrow.
Yes. And if anyone can't get this from Dropbox, let me know, and I can give it to you through my personal email, Google, which I'd rather not do, but as things are changing and we're just getting set with our new overloads at 3 Cloud, there's still this. I think this is the very first webinar that's been done from 3 Cloud, so I think we're going to need to have a SharePoint set up so we can share things from our websites.
Absolutely. And I will also include the link that Robin just shared with you guys in the chat in your email box tomorrow too, along with the recording, so you guys have it.
Thanks. Thank you, Crystal. Yeah. And I know it works. Even my mother was able to download from it. So if she can do it, anyone can. Any other questions?
Someone's asking, I'm not really sure what they mean by this, but can you show the switch statement?
Yes, I can. And matter of fact, Let me, it's really small. I want to make it larger. I'm pulling up Notepad. Oh, there's format. Okay, this is a little bit better. It's really simple. This is one of the simplest switch statements I've ever written. Basically, we have a, for each one of the metrics that's in that line, I have a cumulative measure, which is a very simple cumulative measure. I can show you that too if you want. I'm picking the selected value of the table called selected metric, which is what populates this slicer right here. And then all I do for the switch statement is, okay, I'm saying, okay, what's the selected metric? That's what I'm switching on. If it's no change, then I return the return value, which is just this measure right here. If it's all, then show me the return value. But if it's not either one of those, if it's inflow or outflow or canceled, then just give me a blank. So as I said before, all those lines are actually present here right now. If I click on it, you can see over in the list, they're all there. It's just that they show blank, like there's no records there unless you've chosen the correct item in the slicer menu here. So it's a little bit of what I like to call Power BI trickery. It's doing things you're not supposed to be able to do because you're not supposed to be able to switch to just one line in a line chart when you have many charts. People will tell you you can't do that, but you can if you just trick a little. And whoever said that you loved the design, thank you very much. This wasn't done with very much time. One thing that did come from this line chart is actually something I started doing at that engagement we were at. And the users really like it because it's a lot easier to see a single line than it is to see multiple lines, especially if you might possibly have like 10 or 12 different lines here. And if you can let them limit it down to just 1 or 2 or 3, it's a lot easier for your users to see what's going on and to better understand their data. So I highly recommend the technique. Can you show the steps to bring in Johns Hopkins data to the dashboard? Yes, I can. Okay, so these are the tables right up here. Let me see. I'm going to see if I can make this a little easier for you guys to see. A little hard to do on the fly, but there we go. Hopefully that's a little easier. I know it is for me. So what we have here is we have these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 tables. All of this pretty much ends up, all these 4, the base queries, they end up in these 2 tables, population by country and case tables. Population by country is important because we're going to use this to find out how many cases per million, that type of thing. It's kind of important to be able to know what the population is. And then the case details is just taking everything we get in the other queries and putting it together. We have these functions, get content list, and then get content through 321 and get content after 321. If you start this from fresh and you want to have data before 321, you're going to have to do the same thing. You'll need to have 2 different functions, even though they basically do the same thing. I'll show you again what these do here. I will also tell you now that how fast getting the data is from Johns Hopkins depends on the time of day and how busy it is. Sometimes it can be quite a wait, and other times it's almost instant. So if you try to run this and you're finding that it's taking a while to populate the case details table, it's because you're waiting in line at Johns Hopkins, because half the world is going there right now to get this data. So as you look here, we're seeing in this one, we're actually not using the parameter. I don't know why we didn't use the parameter there. There's probably a reason, but I don't remember what it was. We're basically just going to GitHub. This is the folder that Johns Hopkins stores all their COVID data in. And then you go down to the daily reports. There's a whole list of different reports you can look at there. They have a lot of different metrics. It's really worth going to this GitHub repository and looking at what they have, because if you have specialized needs at your company, or if you just want to see some of the different data that's coming in around COVID, there's all sorts of different metrics that they're pulling in different reports, but we wanted the basic case daily reports for this. So basically, it figures out what the reports are. It gets a list of reports, and it's pulling in where the file dates are in our parameters from the day we start until local now, which is today. This is, in case you haven't worked with Power Query in the past, this is how you get right now. It's like get date in SQL Server, but it's in M language. And we have this. This is how we get it through 321. And here you can see where we actually are using the parameters we've set up. And it just basically goes through a bunch of steps, just like it was a Power Query query. It's renaming some columns, adding columns. And these are just coming in as functions, but then when we get to here, you can see, and this is the case details through 321. This is the old query before we had to change everything. I actually left that in there. But this is what's actually happening now. So we're pulling in from this function get content list, which is what we just looked at. It's saying, run that, get me each file date through 321 and populate it in this table. And what I would suggest, if this is confusing now, if it's making you wonder what the heck is going on, run it a few times, watch it happen. Instead of running the whole thing as a refresh, if you really want to see how things happen, you can come in and say, you know, just refresh this one table, or you can refresh it inside the front end and you won't see as much as far as being able to look at what the code is doing, but you can refresh one table at a time, and I would suggest doing that if you really want to get an idea of how this is working. Here's our parameters. You can manage these the way you manage any kind of parameters. Like I suggest for your CSV folder, if you want to put CSVs in, I just use C COVID webinar. You can change this to be anything you want. The URL and the URL paths, you would only change this if things get weird and they change things again. I don't think after this long they're likely to do that like they did back then. There weren't very many people using this data back in March. And now there's quite a few people. So I hope that answered that question. Oh, how I save the CSV files locally? Yeah, I can show you that. It's actually pretty cool. It's I'm going to give you guys a plug for Dax Studio right now. If you have the latest version of Power BI, you can go to External Tools. And if you have Dax Studio loaded in your PC, and which I suggest that anyone who works with Power BI, you're going to want to do this. Dax Studio, Tabular Editor, ALM Toolkit, these are all awesome, awesome tools. You can find out more about them at SQLBI.com. That's Marco and Alberto, otherwise known as the Italians website. And if you're new to Power BI, it's my absolute favorite resource, even though there's a ton of other great resources out there. So basically what I did is I opened Dax Studio from there, and it loads, when you click it from there, it loads with your current data set. And if you go to Advanced in Dax Studio, you can click Export Data, choose a path. Actually, I'm not going to show all my file paths here, but you choose a path, you hit Next, and then it lets you choose what tables you want to export, and you just hit Next, Export, and it, boom, all done for you in like a minute. Very easy to do. Again, this is Dax Studio. It's not good just for this. It's good for all sorts of wonderful things. Oops. If you want to just format your DAX, you can write a DAX statement, hit Format Query. It'll format for you lovely. You can use Dax Studio along with Power BI to help with performance issues. Not going to go into that. That's a whole nother webinar, and one I'll probably end up doing in the future, but you can find a lot of other ones out there. You're welcome, Nick. Is that it for questions right now? I don't think I see any other questions. So with that said, we're finishing a little early, which never happens. I want to thank you all for being here. I want you to feel free. I'm going to actually type my email address in here. Oops, if I could type. If any of you have extra questions, feel free to contact me at that address. Yes, the presentation video will be on our YouTube channel.
All right. All right, everybody. Thank you guys so much for attending. Robin, thank you so much for hosting. For those of you guys who are asking about the webinar, it is going to be on our YouTube channel. Actually, give me 1 second. I will post the link here to our YouTube channel so you guys can follow our new social media. Give me 1 second. And I'll get that for you guys. But you guys will also be receiving a link in your email box tomorrow with the recording and the downloading link that Robin has provided. And I just put the link to our new YouTube channel in the chat. If you guys have any questions, like I said before, about the acquisition, I also put that in the email as well, along with the video recording. If you guys have any questions, please feel free to reach out to myself or Robin. We'll be more than happy to help. I want to thank you guys so much for attending, and I hope you guys have a good rest of your Tuesday. And thanks so much. We'll see you guys in the next webinar. Somebody is asking.
Yeah, someone, it looks like someone has a question or wants to make a comment about downloading the files.
Tell me what the PBX file. Can you unmute me? Yes. Let me see. Oh, Paul. Let me, 1 second.
Is that Paul?
Yeah, that is Paul. Let me.
Let's just make sure that everyone knows that this is Paul Turley, who is the mastermind behind most of this. So as I said, I watched over his shoulder virtually a lot during the process while I was working on a lot of other stuff at the time.
Paul, can you hear us?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah.
First of all, awesome presentation, Robin.
Thank you.
There were a couple of questions about the GitHub repo link that you had shown earlier. I just wanted to comment on the availability of that. I posted that in the. I think that was probably only visible to you, Crystal. Just the genesis of this project very early on, back in March when I started working on this, I originally set up a GitHub repo and made the PBIX file available to everyone. I'm not quite sure how to share that with everybody on this call, but it is available through my blog. That's probably the easiest place that I can share it, which is SQLServerBI.blog, and if you just search for the COVID report, you'll see a link to that GitHub repo. So that's the original PBIX file, which now Robin has enhanced that quite a lot to be able to do this demonstration. And of course, she's sharing that through Dropbox. We've also created a Power BI template app. And so if you were interested in just using the COVID report as it is without making any modifications, you could just go to the app source within your Power BI tenant and install that. Now, you're not going to be able to download it and make any modifications. And so if you're a Power BI developer, that's probably less interesting for you than going to the GitHub repo, pulling down the PBIX file and making your own enhancements, as Robin suggested.
And I'd like to jump in for a second and say that Paul has also invited people who make enhancements to share them through that GitHub.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. In fact, we've had contributions. Just, you know, if you're connected with the Power BI community, just know that Reza helped out. Miguel Escobar down in Panama helped out with the earlier evolution. Jamie Johnston in Houston. So we've had a number of people actually jump in and kind of make contributions to the early versions of this project. But anyway, I mean, certainly reach out to Robin, who has done a fantastic job demonstrating how to integrate this with corporate data. But if you have you know, questions for me, reach out to me through my blog. And I'm not here to steal Robin's thunder. She's done such a
No. You did amazing work on this. Like, what I always thought was funny was I came up with this idea and then I dropped it entirely because I just had no time. And Paul just, like, I don't know where he got all the time, because he had the same clients I did and he was doing just massive amounts of work. And yet I would log on at, you know, to check email at like crazy hours and he would be working on this.
I just don't sleep. Anyway, back to you, Robin. I just wanted to give my 2 cents, and again, kudos to you for a fantastic presentation.
Oh, that's okay. I'm gonna post your blog. I just sent it to all here in the chat window, so everyone should be able to see it.
All right, perfect.
And thank you, everyone.
No problem. And if you guys want to go ahead and send me those links, I can go ahead and get those over in the email that goes out to everybody, so they can have them right there in their email too as well, just in case.
Okay, that's in the chat window. You'll see the GitHub repo link.
All right, perfect. All right. Well, if there's no other questions, you guys, I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your Tuesday. Paul, thank you so much for chiming in, and Robin, thank you so much for hosting. We greatly appreciate all the work you guys did on this.
Thanks everyone for attending, and you will get the information on how to get the files in your email.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.